The Lego sun blazed mercilessly as Aduni adjusted the flowing ankara fabric of her dress, the bold geometric patterns complementing her rich ebony skin. Her high cheekbones caught the light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of their Ikoyi penthouse, where she was preparing for what should have been a perfect evening. At 28, she possessed the kind of beauty that turned heads. Tall, statuesque, with natural hair styled in elegant locks that cascaded past her shoulders. Across the marble-floored living room, her husband Kemi stood before the mirror, struggling with his bow tie. At 32, he had once been the epitome of masculine perfection: broad shoulders, athletic build, skin like polished mahogany. But 3 years of marriage, stress from building his tech empire, and countless business dinners had added considerable weight to his 6-foot frame. His once chiseled jawline had softened, and his designer shirt strained across his expanded chest. "The Okafor family will be here soon," Aduni said, her voice carrying the crisp accent of her British education. "And don't forget, Tunde is bringing his new girlfriend, the model." Kemi's hands fumbled with the silk tie. I know. Everything has to be perfect for your friends." There was an edge to his voice, a weariness that had crept in over the months as Aduni's criticisms became sharper, more frequent. Their friends began arriving as the sun painted the sky in shades of amber and gold. Tunde Okafor strode in first, his lean, athletic frame moving with the confidence of a successful investment banker. His skin was a warm bronze, his smile bright against perfectly white teeth. Beside him walked Zara, a stunning model whose caramel-toned skin seemed to glow with health and youth. Her natural hair was styled in a chic afro, and her simple black dress emphasized her willowy figure. Following them came Emeka and Folake Adebayo, childhood friends of both Kemi and Aduni. Emeka, a prominent lawyer, carried himself with quiet dignity, his dark skin complemented by a perfectly tailored navy suit. Folake, a successful doctor, was elegant in emerald green, her braided hair swept into an intricate updo that showcased her graceful neck. The evening began well enough. Crystal glasses clinked with imported wine. Laughter echoed through the spacious rooms, and the catered Nigerian fusion cuisine drew compliments from everyone. Kemi found himself relaxing, remembering why he loved entertaining, why he'd fallen in love with Aduni's vivacious personality. But as the night wore on, he noticed the subtle glances between his wife and their friends when they thought he wasn't looking. The way conversations paused when he approached the kitchen for another helping. The barely concealed smirks when he loosened his belt after the main course. "Remember when Kemi used to play basketball every weekend?" Tunde said, swirling his wine. "Man, you were fast on those courts." "Those days are behind him now," Aduni replied quickly, her tone carrying a sharpness that made everyone uncomfortable. "Success changes people. Some of us adapt, others, well, they get comfortable." Kemi felt heat rise in his chest, a familiar burning that had nothing to do with the spicy pepper soup they'd served. He caught Emeka's sympathetic glance and forced a smile, but something inside him was beginning to crack. The evening air grew thick with unspoken tensions as the group moved to the terrace, Lagos glittering below them like scattered diamonds. None of them knew that this perfect evening was about to shatter into pieces that could never be put back together. The terrace overlooked the shimmering waters of Lagos Lagoon, where luxury yachts bobbed like toys in the distance. Soft jazz played from hidden speakers while the group settled into plush outdoor furniture arranged around a gas fire pit. The flames danced hypnotically as conversation flowed with the wine. Zara leaned forward, her model's grace evident in every movement. "This view is incredible. You two are so lucky to have found each other and built all this together." Her genuine warmth made her beauty even more striking. "Oh, we didn't build it together." Aduni laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Kemi was already successful when we met. I just refined things, added some class to his nouveau riche lifestyle." Folake shifted uncomfortably in her chair, her medical training making her acutely aware of the rising tension. "Aduni, perhaps we should—" "What? Speak honestly?" Aduni's eyes glittered dangerously in the firelight. We're all adults here. We can handle truth. Kemi's jaw tightened as he gripped his wine glass. 3 years of marriage had taught him to recognize this mood, this moment when his wife's tongue became a weapon she couldn't resist wielding. Emika, ever the diplomat, attempted to redirect. The food was exceptional tonight. That jollof rice reminded me of my grandmother's recipe. Yes, well, Kemi certainly appreciated it, Aduni said, her gaze fixing on her husband with laser precision. He had 3 helpings. But then again, when has my husband ever shown restraint when it comes to food? The group fell silent except for the distant sound of Lagos traffic and the gentle lapping of water far below. Tunde cleared his throat, his banker's instincts telling him to change the subject quickly. So, Kemi, how's the new software project? Coming along? I heard you landed that government contract. But Aduni wasn't finished. The wine had loosened her tongue, and months of resentment came pouring out like poison. Oh yes, he's very successful in business. It's just his personal discipline that's lacking. Look at him compared to when we married. Kemi set down his glass with deliberate care, his dark eyes flashing. Aduni, that's enough. Is it? She stood gracefully, her elegant frame silhouetted against the city lights. We're among friends, surely they've noticed how you've expanded since our wedding photos. Zara gasped softly, her hand moving to cover her mouth. Even in the modeling world, known for its cruelty, this felt excessive. Remember our honeymoon in Seychelles? Aduni continued, her voice dripping with mock nostalgia. You were so handsome then, athletic, now look at you. The fire crackled ominously as Kemi rose slowly from his chair, all 6 feet and considerable bulk of him radiating controlled fury. His friends had never seen him like this. Dangerous, on the edge of something irreversible. You want to do this? Here? Now? In front of everyone? Why not? Aduni's beauty became sharp, predatory. They have eyes. They can see what I see every morning when I wake up next to my fat elephant of a husband. The words hung in the air like a curse. Folake actually flinched, her medical instincts recognizing the sound of something vital breaking. Emika half rose. From his chair, lawyer's training telling him to intervene before this went too far. But it was already too late. Kemi's face went through a series of expressions: shock, hurt, rage, and finally something much more dangerous. Cold, calculated, fury. When he spoke, his voice was so quiet everyone had to strain to hear him. Get out. What? Aduni blinked, perhaps realizing she'd crossed a line she couldn't uncross. I said get out. All of you. Leave my house. Now. The friends scattered like startled birds gathering purses and jackets with mumbled apologies and promises to call. Only Aduni remained, staring at her husband as if seeing him for the first time. Kemi, I didn't mean. Yes, you did. His voice carried the finality of a judge's gavel. You meant every word, and now you're going to live with the consequences. The weeks following that disastrous evening passed like a slow-motion car crash. Aduni moved through their penthouse like a ghost haunting her own life, trying to pretend that her marriage hadn't imploded in front of their closest friends. But Kemi's silence was more devastating than any shouting match could have been. He left early for work and returned late, sometimes not at all. When pressed, he claimed he was staying at his office or one of his properties, but Aduni suspected the truth was more complicated. The man who had once sought her approval for everything now made decisions without consulting her, his independence growing stronger as her confidence crumbled. Their friends had scattered like leaves in a storm. Folake called once, her voice carefully neutral as she asked if Aduni needed anything. But the subtext was clear. The medical professional was concerned about both parties in this marriage, and her sympathy didn't lie entirely with the wife. I was drunk, Aduni explained, desperately during that brief conversation. You know I didn't mean it like that. But you did say it, Folake replied gently, and words once spoken can't be taken back. They echo. The echo was growing louder by the day. Lagos society operated on whispers and social media, and the story of Aduni's public humiliation of her husband spread through their circle like wildfire. At the exclusive Ikoyi Club, conversations stopped when she entered. At gallery openings and charity events, she found herself increasingly isolated. Meanwhile, something remarkable was happening to Kemi. The hurt and rage that had consumed him after that terrible night began transforming into something more productive. He threw himself into a fitness regimen with the same intensity he'd once applied to building his business empire. At 5 a.m. each morning, he was at the gym with a personal trainer, a former athlete named Chidi, whose own transformation story had become legendary in Lagos fitness circles. The pounds began dropping off Kemi like shed armor, revealing the strong frame that had attracted Aduni years earlier. "Pain is just weakness leaving the body," Chidi would say during their brutal training sessions, but Kemi knew it was more than that. Each drop of sweat was washing away years of diminished self-worth. Each burned calorie was fuel for his growing independence. The changes weren't just physical. Kemi's businesses, neglected during the comfortable years of his marriage, began thriving under his renewed attention. He made bold moves, took calculated risks, and found himself more successful than ever. The tech company he'd started in his 20s expanded into new markets. The real estate investments he'd made began paying massive dividends. Aduni watched her husband's transformation with growing alarm. This wasn't the repentant, defeated man she'd expected. This was someone new, someone harder, someone who looked at her with eyes that held no warmth, no forgiveness, and most terrifyingly, no need. "We should talk," she said one evening, cornering him in his home office where he'd been working late again. Kemi didn't look up from his laptop. His face, now lean and angular again, remained impassive. "About what?" "About us. About what happened. About what I said." Now he did look at her, and Aduni felt her breath catch. The man before her was devastatingly handsome again, but there was something in his expression that hadn't been there before. A hardness that made her beautiful features seem suddenly fragile. "What about it? I was wrong. I was drunk and stupid and cruel, and I'm sorry." Kemi leaned back in his chair, studying her as if she were a stranger. "Are you sorry you said it, or sorry that it had consequences?" The question hung between them like a blade. Aduni realized with growing horror that she didn't know the answer herself. Outside their windows, Lagos pulsed with its eternal energy, millions of people living their lives while hers seemed to be disintegrating. She had thought she held all the power in their relationship, but she was beginning to understand that power once broken was almost impossible to reclaim. 3 months after that fateful evening, Aduni barely recognized her own life. The woman who had once commanded attention at every social gathering now found herself declining invitations she wasn't receiving. Lagos society had a long memory for public humiliation, and her treatment of Kemi had marked her as someone capable of cruelty that went beyond acceptable bounds. The irony wasn't lost on her that as Kemi transformed, becoming more attractive and successful than ever, her own stock was plummeting. Where once she had been the prize he was lucky to have won, she now felt like damaged goods. Her modeling agency, which had kept her on their books more for her social connections than her active career, quietly dropped her contract. The exclusive boutiques in Victoria Island, where she'd once been treated like royalty, now seemed less eager to accommodate her demands for special treatment. Meanwhile, Kemi had become Lagos's most eligible married man, a contradiction that wasn't lost on anyone. His transformation was the stuff of social media legend. Paparazzi photos showed him leaving his gym, his business meetings, his charity events, looking better than he had in years. The tech mogul who had once hidden behind his wife's social prowess now commanded rooms with his presence alone. The final blow came at the Adoniran Foundation Gala, Lagos's most prestigious charity event. Aduni had spent hours preparing, choosing, a stunning gold gown that complemented her skin tone perfectly, having her hair styled by the city's most expensive salon. She needed to remind people who she was, to reclaim her position in their social hierarchy. But when she arrived at the Oriental Hotel's ballroom, she found herself facing a reality she hadn't anticipated. Kemi was there, of course. His business, empire made him impossible to exclude from such events. But he wasn't alone. Standing beside him, radiant in a simple but elegant navy dress, was Zara, the model who had witnessed that terrible evening on their terrace. Her natural beauty seemed to glow with inner confidence, and the way she looked at Kemi suggested their relationship had evolved far beyond mere friendship. "They make a beautiful couple, don't they?" The voice belonged to Folake, who had appeared, beside Aduni like a medical professional checking on a patient's condition. Aduni couldn't speak. She watched as Kemi and Zara moved through the crowd, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back, her laughter genuine and warm as she responded to something he whispered in her ear. "When did this happen?" Aduni finally managed. "Does it matter?" Folake's tone was professionally neutral, but her dark eyes held a mixture of pity and something harder. "You destroyed your marriage in public. Did you think there wouldn't be consequences?" The evening became a blur of whispered conversations that stopped when Aduni approached, of sympathetic glances that felt more like condescension, of watching her husband, still legally her husband, court another woman with all the charm and attention he'd once lavished on her. The breaking point came during the charity auction. Kemi bid aggressively on a weekend getaway to a luxury resort in Zanzibar, his competitive spirit evident as he outbid several other wealthy attendees. When the auctioneer's gavel fell, confirming his winning bid of 2 million naira, he turned to Zara with a smile that could have powered half of Lagos. "Our first real vacation together," he said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Aduni felt something die inside her chest. This wasn't just about another woman. It was about the public replacement of her position, the complete erasure of her importance in Kemi's life. She left the gala early, her gold dress suddenly feeling like a costume she no longer had the right to wear. The driver, Kemi's driver, she realized with a fresh stab of pain, was professionally courteous as he took her home to a penthouse that felt more like a mausoleum than a home. That night, alone in their massive bed, Aduni finally understood the true cost of her cruelty. She had called her husband a fat elephant in front of their friends, thinking she held all the power in their relationship. But power, she was learning, was as fragile as pride, and both could be lost with a few carelessly chosen words. The irony was exquisite in its cruelty. In trying to diminish him, she had created the conditions for his transformation. In seeking to humiliate him publicly, she had driven him into the arms of a woman who would never dream of such betrayal. As Lagos slept around her, Aduni finally wept, not just for her marriage but for the woman she had become and the woman she might never be again. 6 months had passed since the night that changed everything, and Aduni barely recognized the reflection staring back at her from the bathroom mirror. The stress had carved hollows beneath her high cheekbones, and her once lustrous skin seemed to have lost its glow. Even her luxurious locks appeared lifeless despite the expensive treatments she could no longer really afford. The divorce papers had arrived 3 weeks ago, delivered by a courier who seemed apologetic about the contents of his package. Kemi's lawyer, not Emeka, their former friend, had recused himself from the case, had been brutally efficient. The prenuptial agreement Aduni had laughingly signed during their engagement, never believing it would matter, now looked like a prophecy of her downfall. She would keep the jewelry, some personal items, and a modest settlement that would allow her to maintain a comfortable but far from luxurious lifestyle. The penthouse, the cars, the membership to exclusive clubs, the lifestyle she had taken for granted, all of it belonged to Kemi's empire, not to their marriage. The final humiliation came in the form of an invitation, not to her, but one she found by accident when visiting her former hairdresser. Among the stack of society invitations scattered across Kemi's salon counter was an elegant card with gold embossing, Kemi and Zara's engagement party. "I wasn't supposed to let you see that," Kemi said softly, her kind eyes filled with genuine sympathy, "but perhaps it's better that you know." Aduni held the invitation with trembling fingers. The engagement photos showed a couple radiant with happiness. Kemi, now lean and powerful, his success evident in every line of his perfectly tailored suit. Zara beside him, her natural beauty enhanced by the confidence of a woman who knew she was cherished. "He's marrying her," Aduni whispered. 3 months from now. The ceremony will be at the cathedral, reception at the 4 Points. It's going to be the wedding of the season. The irony was perfect in its completeness. The social event of the year would be celebrating Kemi's new life, his transformation, his escape from the woman who had tried to diminish him. That evening, Aduni found herself walking along Bar Beach, something she hadn't done since her university days. The Atlantic Ocean stretched endlessly before her, indifferent to human drama, eternal in its rhythms. The sound of waves washing against the shore provided a soundtrack to her thoughts. Her phone buzzed, a text message from an unknown number. "I heard about the divorce. I know we haven't spoken since that night, but if you need someone to talk to, I'm here. Folake." For the first time in months, Aduni smiled. A real smile, not the brittle mask she'd been wearing in public. She had burned so many bridges, destroyed so many relationships, that this small gesture of friendship felt like a lifeline. She called the number immediately. "Folake, it's me." "I know." The doctor's voice was warm but cautious. "How are you holding up?" "I'm not," Aduni admitted, sitting on the seawall as the sun began to set over Lagos. "I destroyed everything, didn't I?" "You made a terrible mistake," Folake said carefully. "But mistakes don't have to define us forever." They talked for an hour, and for the first time since that disastrous evening, Aduni felt something other than regret and self-pity. She felt the possibility of redemption, of growth, of becoming someone better than the woman who had called her husband a fat elephant in front of their friends. "I need to apologize to him," Aduni said finally. "Not because I want him back, that ship has sailed, but because he deserves to hear it." "Are you sure you're ready for that?" Aduni watched the last light fade from the sky, Lagos beginning to twinkle with its nighttime energy. "I have to be. I can't move forward until I own what I did." 2 weeks later, she waited in the lobby of Kemi's office building, no longer the wife with automatic access but a visitor requesting an appointment. When he finally appeared, she was struck again by his transformation. This wasn't just about weight loss. This was about confidence reclaimed, dignity restored, power rebuilt from the ground up. "Aduni." His voice was professionally polite. Nothing more. "Thank you for seeing me." She stood, smoothing her simple dress. No designer labels, no statement jewelry, just quiet elegance. "I know you don't owe me anything." They sat in his office, Lagos sprawling beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, and for a moment, Aduni remembered when she used to visit him here during their early dating days, how proud she'd been of his success. "I came to apologize," she said simply. "Not for the divorce, not for the consequences, those were inevitable after what I did. I came to apologize for the person I became, for the words I said, for the humiliation I put you through." Kemi listened without interruption, his dark eyes unreadable. "I called you a fat elephant in front of our friends," she continued, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. "I tried to diminish you, to make myself feel powerful by making you feel small. It was cruel and petty and unforgivable. You deserved better than that. You deserved better than me." When she finished, they sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, Kemi spoke. "Thank you for saying that. I needed to hear it. I heard about your engagement. Congratulations. She's beautiful and she clearly makes you happy." "She does." His smile, when it came, was genuine. "She sees the best in me, encourages it. She would never use my vulnerabilities as weapons." The truth of that statement hung between them like a verdict. As Aduni left his office for the last time, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Peace. She had lost everything: her marriage, her social standing, her comfortable life. But in that loss, she had found something else. The possibility of becoming someone worthy of forgiveness, even if that forgiveness came too late to save what she had destroyed. The elevator descended toward the ground floor, carrying her away from the life she had built and destroyed, toward whatever came next. For the first time since that terrible evening, Aduni felt ready to find out who she could become when she was no longer the woman who had called her husband a fat elephant, who had lived to regret it, and who was finally ready to live with the consequences of her choices. Outside, Lagos pulsed with its eternal energy, full of second chances for those brave enough to claim them.